Adrien was born in the year 1960 in London to a working-class family. His life was fairly unremarkable until his second year as a student at Manchester University. He was studying English and creative writing, though he barely showed up to any classes, spending more time with his punk band than on his studies. He only barely scraped by at the end of his first year on the second attempt. He wasn't the best flatmate either, though, to be fair, the 3 other students he lived with in a run-down, grubby little flat weren't the easiest company. At the start of their second year, one of their group named Liam, whose parents were wealthy, bought them all a house just outside the city in a small, mostly run-down village named Alos. It might not have been as near as their old flat, but it was still only a 30-minute train ride away. Unfortunately, the new house that Liam's parents had bought contained a terrible secret. Centuries ago, it had been the hideout of a necromancer named Jaskarath. He had attempted to find a way to perfect resurrection spells after the Great Plague, genuinely hoping he could restore the lost generation. All other forms of resurrection spell were either crude or contained some kind of price. Jaskarath's attempts resulted not only in more zombies and undead creatures, but the level of concentrated magic from his experiments began to rewrite the natural laws near the house, turning Alos into a hellish place where all kinds of abominations and distortions existed. Jaskarath, aided by witches from all over Albion, later found a way to fuse the unstable magics into the cellar below the house. Sadly, however, they were unable to destroy the concentrated magic, as the locals, having already suffered enough thanks to Jaskarath's mistakes, did not want him carrying out more experiments and drove him and the rest of the coven out. For hundreds of years afterwards, the house remained abandoned, with its reputation as a place of evil living on. Liam's parents, meanwhile, did not pay any attention to what they viewed as the infantile superstitions surrounding it, and hoped they could perhaps turn the house into a tourist spot through renovation. Ultimately, however, it didn't work, as there was so little history about the house known outside of Alos, whose inhabitants still shunned it. There was also nothing particularly special about it otherwise, on the surface, so it just became more property to rent. Unknown to Adrien and the others, some of the magics that were buried below had developed a degree of sentience, having morphed into a new single magical creature and slowly influenced Liam to release it. The creature was eventually able to take control of Liam for a short period of time, without his knowledge, for every day, where it would have him perform rituals that slowly broke Jaskarath and the witch's magical lock. Once the magic was released, it instantly consumed their house, and the 4 students soon found themselves fighting for survival. Zombie-like creatures made from the corpses of Jaskarath's other old experiments emerged from the floorboards. Statues outside came to life. Paintings became portals to other worlds. Adrien's pet dog, already an aggressive pit bull, grew to over 20 feet long and tried to eat them, whilst a dinosaur, specifically an Allosaurus, that Jaskarath had attempted to bring back from its bones as one of his experiments, thinking it was a dragon before disposing of it, returned to life in the garden. The Allosaurus was not how it had been in life, thanks to Jaskarath's magics. It was much larger, stood upright, and was a lot more aggressive. The 4 boys were soon aided by a mysterious stranger called Leanne, who had been stalking their house for days beforehand. Leanne was in fact Jaskarath's greatest experiment. She had been brought back almost exactly as she had been before the plague had killed her, though sadly she would later discover that she was also rendered immortal too. She had a connection to the magics that had been entombed and could sense when they had influenced Liam to some extent. Her previous attempts to investigate the house had also been hindered by Adrien and the others. Sadly, whilst Liam was able to barely rescue the others, Adrien was mauled to death by his own dog. In that house, however, he wouldn't stay dead for long, and the magic soon revived him as a zombie-like creature. His skin was distorted until it was turned green by the magics, whilst half of his face and even part of his skull were missing. Despite this, his body was significantly stronger than before, with the magics also protecting his exposed brain. Unlike most other zombies, he retained both his intelligence and his free will, though he was still overcome by a desire to eat flesh, which he had to constantly fight against. The other 3 boys, meanwhile, were also distorted and mutated by the magics, and along with their zombified friend, were forced to take up residence in their old student flat. Using glamour magics provided by Liam, which made them appear human, they all attempted to return to their old lives, whilst helping Liam battle against the magics that had been unleashed from the house into the town and surrounding areas. Their main enemy was the new magical creature that had been entombed for all those years that had escaped, which attempted to carry on Jaskarath's work and created several new, horrific zombie and magical abominations throughout the town. Worse, the magics that formed this creature also soon began to break apart, resulting in stray spells all over the town, leading to worse horrors. Arguably, the 2 biggest calamities to befall the town as a result of the stray spells were the undead dinosaurs and the Great Flood. The former saw a stray spell revive more dinosaurs buried beneath the earth in a similar fashion to the Allosaurus. The latter, meanwhile, was the result of an infamous enchantment that caused magic rain to pour on a town for 2 weeks non-stop, until it was flooded. The enchantment also prevented anyone from escaping during that time. Finally, the magical water was also filled with hostile sea creatures, conjured by the spell itself. Jaskarath had been experimenting with the spell due to its ability to create life, but he quickly and wisely abandoned it. The 4 students, with Liam's help, were able to undo the effects of the flood spell and save their city, which, for a short while, would cause them to be viewed as local heroes. Sadly, when they finally defeated the monstrous entity created by Jaskarath's magics, their true nature as magical creatures were exposed to the town at large, and they were soon forced out, despite Liam's efforts to help them. On the road, the foursome eventually split up after a vicious fight, and Adrien went on alone, never bothering to use the glamour to cover his appearance again. For the next 10 years he travelled the world, staying in cheap motels, living off the animals he hunted on the road. He still occasionally, as ridiculous as it may have sounded, played gigs with bands where his monstrous appearance was simply explained away as makeup. In the mid-1980s, he joined the reformed vampire Carleen as part of her team that travelled across the entire United Kingdom. He and the vampire developed an unlikely friendship due to their love of music and even performed some gigs together. After his time with Carleen, Adrien was later forced into a partnership with another reformed vampire named Alan Morgan. He was not a genuinely remorseful vampire like Carleen or Vincent. Alan had simply been bribed with a spell that allowed him to walk in the daylight and be immune to other weaknesses of his breed as long as he helped people. He was still just as selfish and corrupt as ever, and he and Adrien did not like one another, but they were both forced to work together by a coven of witches that Adrien had befriended, and who were also responsible for the spell that allowed Alan to work in daylight. Adrien and Alan were sent to help the town of Stattel that was overrun by supernatural creatures. By the end of their 5-year partnership, Adrien and Alan had succeeded surprisingly, despite their chaotic partnership, in freeing the town, but sadly they had almost killed each other many times over.